The cargo vessel Mendicant was a gentle giant, a bloated merchant ship with more mass and life support and storage than an armor. Its captain Hal had spent 40 years traversing the trade routes, a man who believed the universe was held together by contracts and credit. He had seen the Vether patrols in the outer sectors before, angular, aggressive ships that looked like knives of dark metal. They were the self-proclaimed guardians of their faith, a species that believed their gods demanded expansion. They'd always been a nuisance, a bureaucratic blockade. Nuisances didn't fire. The scanner chirped and Hal glanced at the screen. 4 contacts, Vether combat vessels. They had broken from their patrol pattern and were on an intercept course. He opened a broad-spectrum channel, his voice calm but firm. This is the civilian transport Mendicant carrying humanitarian medical supplies and cultural data to the Yetha hub. We are a neutral craft registered with the Galactic Trade Guild. Requesting permission to proceed unmolested. The channel crackled with silence, then a voice high and sharp, devoid of any warmth. You are within territory claimed by the Vether Combine. You will power down your engines and prepare for inspection. Hal frowned. They were light years from any Vether territory. Commander, with all respect, our navigation is clear. We are in neutral space. I have the coordinates to prove it. You will not argue. You will comply. I, the Mendicants. Captain Hal felt a cold prickle at the base of his skull. Something was wrong. The way the alien warships held formation, precise, deliberate, patient, carried none of the casual authority of a routine patrol. They were waiting. They were testing. He opened a channel to his 2 escort corvettes, small but capable vessels that flanked the Mendicant like loyal hounds. Stay sharp, something isn't right. Send a burst transmission to the nearest human outpost. Tell them we may be in a situation. The transmission never left the system. The Vether commander did not require compliance. He required a demonstration. 4 spear-shaped warships unleashed a coordinated volley of particle beams. The energy lances moved at a fraction of light speed, but in the compressed geography of the void, the gap between firing and impact was nearly nothing. The 2 human corvettes, their shields barely flickering to life, were carved in half. Their reactors ignited in brilliant twin flares that burned hot and then went utterly dark. Aboard the Mendicant, Hal had just enough time to form a single thought. They didn't even hail a warning. Then the first beams struck the cargo bay. It was not a military strike, it was an execution. The ship's aging armor crumpled, and atmosphere vented in a silent, violent torrent into the void. The second beam hit the bridge. Hal saw a flash of pure, absolute white and then nothing. The Vether commander, a being named Vilex, watched the debris field expand with clinical satisfaction. 3 ships, hundreds of lives, erased in under a minute. It was a statement, a confirmation of strength. Humanity had been expanding too quickly through the outer systems, trading too freely with species the Combine considered beneath them. Their growing wealth had bred arrogance. The Vether High Council had decreed that a lesson must be delivered. The lesson was complete. Vilex did not order a salvage operation. There was nothing of worth in the wreckage. He ordered his ships to turn about and resume their patrol, already composing the mission report in his mind. He did not look back. To the ghost in the network. The silence of the void should have been total. It was not. A distress signal, a final, desperate howl of compressed data, had been launched by the Mendicant's emergency beacon in the last milliseconds before its destruction. It punched through local interference and found the relay network, bouncing from satellite to satellite across the light years like a digital ghost rattling through a vast, dark corridor. It was the ghost of a dead ship, but its message was sharp, precise, and potent, a location, an account of the attack, and the identification codes of the attackers. On a distant blue planet, the message arrived, and a chain reaction began. Not of panic, of cold, analytical fury. Data packets lit up military servers across 3 continents. News feeds flickered to life with the breaking report. The face of Commander Vilex, captured from his own ship's recognition systems, was broadcast on every screen, every feed, every channel. The attack was analyzed, deconstructed, and understood for exactly what it was. An act of war delivered without declaration, an act of murder committed with pride. The humans of Earth did not know the Vether Combine's gods or their territorial claims or their ancient hierarchies. They knew exactly one thing: their people had been killed. That was the only metric that mattered. Three, the human defense. The chamber carved into the mountain's heart was sparse, functional, and cold. No grand flags, no ceremonial trappings. Just a single massive holographic display showing the wreckage of the Mendicant, a grainy long-distance capture from a navigation buoy that nonetheless told the entire story. Admiral Korensky stood at the center of the room. He was a man carved from old decisions and heavier consequences, a veteran of the colonization wars, a man who had watched the surface of Mars burn. He had lost people before, but this was different. The Vether had not even bothered with demands. They had simply killed. He addressed the hologram rather than the politicians and scientists and intelligence officers assembled around him. A projection of Vether response. A thin woman with sharp glasses spoke from across the room. They expect a formal protest, a demand for reparations. They believe we are a mercantile species, a civilization of traders. They think our only move is to talk. Korensky made a sound like gravel grinding. They don't understand us. We don't trade in death. We make a study of it. He turned from the hologram and faced the council. They think we will mourn quietly and send diplomats. They expect us to let our dead become a statistic. A politician, a nervous man from a nation that had once valued diplomacy above all else, cleared his throat. Admiral, we have no formal declaration of war. Are we certain of intent? A rogue commander, perhaps. Korensky silenced him with a look that could have fractured glass. The commander transmitted his ship's IFF beacon. He didn't hide. He was proud. He wanted us to know his name. This was not a rogue act. It was a test. He pressed a key on his console. The hologram shifted to a galaxy map, Vether space burning red at its edges. They attacked a soft target to measure our reaction. They are about to receive their answer. The debate, if it could be called that, lasted 3 hours. In the end, there was no vote. There was only consensus. The question was never whether to respond, it was only how quickly. The Human Defense Council issued its declaration not as a dramatic address, but as a single stark communiqué broadcast across every human frequency. Effective immediately, the human species declares a state of war against the Vether Combine. All diplomatic channels are severed. All Vether military and logistical assets are considered hostile. This is a war of retribution. In the Vether capital on the far side of the galaxy, the High Council received the message. They had expected threats, demands, a list of grievances to be negotiated over years. They had not expected efficiency. The declaration was followed within 30 minutes by a second transmission. A comprehensive list of known Vether military outposts, their precise coordinates, and their detailed defensive capabilities. The accuracy was terrifying. High Commander Erlach stared at the list and felt something he had not experienced in centuries of war: the cold, creeping awareness of catastrophic miscalculation. They have been watching us, he whispered. They knew our positions. They have been preparing. They are not surprised by this war. They were waiting for a reason to begin it. He looked at his council, their faces painted with the religious markings of generations. We attacked a convoy, he said, barely above a whisper. We killed a handful of traitors, and they have answered with a war. The weight of what they had done was, at last, pressing down on them. They had not attacked a convoy. They had struck a people whose entire history was forged in the fire of catastrophe, a species that had never once failed to answer violence with greater violence. They had miscalculated the cost of a human life. For the valiant hearts, Commander Anya Ristova stood on the bridge of the Valiant Heart, flagship of the 7th Fleet, and looked like a woman made of controlled fire. Human warships were not elegant. They had been designed by a species that had learned the craft of war on a world that wanted them dead, rugged, redundant, built to absorb punishment and return it with interest. The Valiant Heart was a gray beast of a vessel, its hull scarred from a dozen engagements, its weapons arrays looking more like industrial machinery than the sleek, tapered weapons of other civilizations. Ristova's face was a mask of command, but her crew knew her eyes. She had known Captain Hal. They had served together a decade ago. He had taught her a card game that required reading your opponent's face, a game of patience and observation. He had been a good man, a good captain. Now he was a drifting cloud of debris in a dead sector of space. Her first officer, Commander Soren, appeared at her side. All ships report green, jump drives are spooled. We are ready, Commander. Little targets. Confirmed the Vether forward operating base at Takara, a staging ground for their patrol fleets, approximately 2,000. And military personnel. Ristova nodded once. Weapons status. All batteries loaded, kinetic and energy. 100 strike craft ready for deployment, coordinates locked. Pause. No survivors. Soren did not flinch. He had seen the footage from the Mendicant. Understood. The jump to hyperspace was a violent tear in the fabric of reality. The universe stretched and twisted and reformed around them. The Valiant Heart and her escorts arrived in the Takara system in a blaze of displaced energy and found the base exactly where the intelligence said it would be. The Vether defenders were sluggish, their response time measured in minutes rather than seconds. They had received the declaration of war, but they hadn't believed it. They had expected bluster, not arrival. They did not know that human military doctrine was to open a war by ending the enemy's capacity to fight one. Ristova did not give a speech. She did not offer terms. Fire. The Valiant Heart's main rail cannon, a weapon that accelerated a tungsten penetrator to a significant fraction of light speed, discharged with a sound like the end of the world. The round struck the base's shield with the force of a collapsing star. The shield did not break. It evaporated. The second volley punched clean through the pyramid's armored hull. Human strike craft swarmed from their bays like a cloud of angry wasps, targeting defensive turrets with surgical missile fire. The Vether ships still docked in the base were powering up when the human cruisers entered the kill zone and simply collapsed the docking bay doors, trapping them inside. It was not a battle, it was a surgical removal. The humans moved in formation patterns that seemed designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. Their shields were used not merely as protection, but as weapons, crashing against enemy hulls to disrupt firing solutions. They fought with a frightening, seamless coordination. In 11 minutes, the Vether base was gone. Not damaged, not captured, erased. On the bridge of the Valiant Heart, there were no cheers. Only silence and the grim satisfaction of a mission completed. Ristova felt a small, cold weight lift from her chest. One downs. She turned to Soren. Send word to Earth. First strike successful. Takara eliminated, proceeding to secondary targets. And if the Vether are listening on our frequency. She looked at the ruined debris field on the screen. Good, let them see what happens when they kill our people. They started this war. She turned from the screen. We will finish it. 5 Vilex watches the recording. Commander Vilex was aboard the Sword of Faith when the news arrived. He watched the Takara recording 3 times. Each time he watched more carefully, tracking the movement of the human ships, analyzing the timing of their volleys, studying the way their formations overlapped and shifted. The humans had not used the standard doctrine of circling and engaging from range. They had charged. Their capital ships had closed to point-blank distance, a suicidal choice by any rational calculation. But it had not been suicidal. It had been deliberate. Their shields, layered in overlapping patterns, had absorbed the Vether fire, while their rail cannons delivered devastating returns at a range where accuracy was near perfect. They had calculated it, all of it. He understood war. He understood how to read a battle, how to weigh losses, when to press and when to withdraw, but he did not understand this. They had arrived without hesitation, without a demand for surrender, without a pause to assess the situation. They had simply appeared and destroyed everything. His communications officer, a young Vether named Rel, spoke quietly. "Commander, the High Council is demanding an audience. They are concerned." Vilex almost laughed, concerned. That was a mild word for the panic that was fracturing the Empire. Their forward base, a symbol of Combine dominance, had been annihilated in 11 minutes with no human casualties. The scale of the loss was beyond calculation. He pulled up the intelligence files on humanity. They were thin. Humanity had been dismissed as a minor power, a trading civilization with more interest in commerce than conquest. But buried in the files was a history, the history of their world. A record of competing civilizations, constant warfare, weapons of mass destruction, a species that had nearly consumed itself and somehow survived. Had not merely survived. Had thrived. Vilex closed the file. The cold dread that settled in his stomach was not fear of their ships or their weapons. It was the recognition of what drove them. He had attacked a convoy and called it a demonstration of strength. They had answered with the systematic dismantling of an empire. He had not awakened an enemy. He had awakened a force that had never known peace. 6. The interrogation. The room was a simple metal box, not a place of pain but of conversation. Commander Ristova Stowe. Odd on one side of a clear barrier. On the other sat Commander Grell, the sole survivor of a Vether vessel disabled in a recent skirmish. He was tall, rigid, and wore his religious markings with the pride of a man who had never been bested. Until now. He glared at Ristova with defiance blazing in his eyes. "You have no right to hold me. I am a warrior of the Combine. I should have died in battle, not been taken prisoner by. You are here to answer one question." Ristova said. Her voice carried no anger, no triumph. It was flat as a blade. "Why did you attack the mendicants?" Grell stared at her as if she had asked why the sky was dark. "Why? Because you were in our space. Because the Combine does not tolerate the presence of lesser species in our territory. You were a target. We destroyed you. That is the order of things." "That is not a reason," Ristova said. "That is an excuse." She pressed a key on the console beside her. A holographic display flickered to life on Grell's side of the barrier and began to play a montage of human history. Swords and spears, rifles and artillery, cities burning, the desolate aftermath of nuclear fire. A species fighting itself across centuries, nearly tearing itself apart, pulling itself from the wreckage time and again. Grell watched in silence. When it ended, he looked different. "You think our wealth makes us soft," Ristova said. "You think comfort breeds complacency. But we did not reach the stars through comfort. We clawed our way here through 10,000 years of blood and fire. We have fought ourselves, our planet, and our own worst nature. We have survived things that should have ended us." She leaned forward. "You killed our people. You believed it was an act of strength. To us, it was an act of war, and we have only one answer for acts of war, not diplomacy, not reparations, retribution. We do not fight for territory, Commander Grell. We fight for survival. And when our people are murdered, the only acceptable response is to ensure it never happens again. Grell was quiet for a long moment. You are going to destroy us, he said at last. His voice was barely a whisper. We are not going to destroy you, Ristova replied, stepping back from the barrier. We are going to finish you. There is a difference. 7. The shape of the war. The war expanded across the galaxy with the speed and inevitability of a firestorm. The Vether Combine, a military empire that had subdued dozens of systems and considered itself the dominant power of its region of space, found its fleets being methodically dismantled. The humans did not fight for territory. They had no interest in occupation or governance. They fought with a singular purpose: to destroy the Combine's capacity to wage war. Every outpost, every supply depot, every fuel refinery, every shipyard. The human fleet moved with terrifying speed, striking multiple targets simultaneously in a pattern no Vether strategist could predict. They used the Combine's own communication networks against them, feeding false data into relay stations, luring fleets into precisely planned ambushes, turning the Vether's infrastructure into a weapon against itself. The Vether had never faced an enemy like this. Their rigid command hierarchies, their reliance on predictable engagement doctrines, their faith in technological superiority, all of it was rendered useless by the chaotic, adaptive, and deeply personal nature of human warfare. Commander Vilex found himself on the defensive for the first time in his career. His battle group was tasked with protecting a key supply corridor when the human task force appeared, as they always did, without warning. The battle was a nightmare. Human ships crashing through Vether formations at point-blank range, their rail cannons firing at distances where targeting computers were almost redundant. Strike craft swarming the flanks, hunting engines and weapons arrays with methodical precision. Vilex watched his ships die. He ordered a retreat. The humans had anticipated it. A blocking force was already positioned behind him. The Sword of Faith was caught in a crossfire, her shields failing, damage reports scrolling endlessly across his neural interface. His weapons officer, young Rel, called out, "Commander, they are hailing us. They are offering terms." Terms, the word was almost alien to Vilex. The Combine did not negotiate from defeat. The Combine dictated from strength. But he was beaten, his ship was crippled, his crew was dying. He opened the channels. Ristova's face appeared on his screen. Her expression was unreadable, neither triumph nor contempt, simply waiting. Commander Vilex, you were the one who ordered the attack on the Mendicant. It was not a question, Vilex straightened. I was. Ristova was silent for a moment. You have seen what your decision has wrought. I am giving you a choice. Surrender your ship and your crew or die in it. He wanted to refuse, his pride demanded refusal, but he looked at the damage reports, at the names of the dead still scrolling across the display. He made the hardest decision of his life. I surrender. The channel closed. As the human ships moved to secure his vessel, Vilex watched them work. There were no celebrations, no gloating, no ceremonies of victory, just quiet, efficient purpose securing his ship, then moving on to the next target. He understood then, perhaps for the first time, what he had truly done. He had not provoked a war, he had provoked a species. At 8, the council in the sanctuary. The Vether High Council convened in the temple ship sanctuary, a massive mobile structure of black metal and ancient iconography that had served as the spiritual and political heart of the Combine for centuries. Now it felt like a chapel preparing for a funeral. The holographic display showed the current state of the war. Vether territory was contracting by the hour, fleets annihilated, supply lines severed, commanders captured or dead. High Commander Erlach's voice shook with something that had never touched it before, not rage, but fear. They do not fight by any doctrine we understand. They do not offer surrender. They do not pause to consolidate